Everyone has a story, but not everyone knows who they are or what adventure they're in. What story are you in? I'm Jurri Schenck. Welcome to the Legends of the Wind podcast, a conversation about a collection of personal myths, fairy tales, and fables written for real people. These stories help them discover their own hero's journey. Here we learn to look at life through the lens of story and think mythically. Imagine yourself in the story of a lifetime where you realize how vital you are. Discover your own tale and join others as well here in Legends of the Wind. Hi, welcome to the Legends of the Wind podcast. Thank you for joining us today. I want you to know that this podcast is a very special, unique take about life and storytelling. Its purpose is to help people to think mythically about their life. What is your life like as a story? Who are you in your hero's journey? What kind of adventure are you in? And what do you need to overcome? And what kind of revelation do you need to see your adventure through to the end of the story? We want to present in this show different stories that were written for actual people, children and adults, and how we unpack them and learn from those stories through metaphor, through psychology, through storytelling, all sorts of different ways of looking at these stories and learning from them and applying what the lessons in them in our lives. The audience is meant for both young and old. It's not just for kids, not just for adults. And the ideas in these storytellings and in these conversations are meant to be universal. They're for everyone. Everyone of any age can learn from them. You can find me, Jurri Schenck, on social media. In the notes below, there's different tags. You can also find us at legendsofthewind.com and also my personal site, loversdreamersandme.com. Today's legend is very special. I wrote it for a close friend of mine about 10 years ago, and even today it has come full circle. Today's legend is something that we deal with in all of our lives in many different forms. It has to do with fathers. So let me show you my friend Aaron Torres, our guest today. Hi, Aaron. Welcome to Legends of the Wind. Thank you for coming today.
Thanks, Jurri.
Cool. Aaron is a Union International cinematographer and director who is an alumnus of USC. He shoots independent features and television for Netflix, Disney, and Bravo. He can be found roaming the streets with his still camera, directing commercials, or shooting documentaries. He can be reached on Instagram at Aaron Torres DP, and you can find him on his website, aarontorres.com. His photography is outstanding, so please check him out. Cool. Aaron, thanks for coming, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool. So I want the audience to know that I wrote this story a long time ago when I was working with a bunch of kids and adults in this program. And I didn't have any prior knowledge of Aaron's personal life or his family history, anything like that when I wrote this story. And also, it's been so long that there's things in Aaron's life today that have resurfaced in this story. And it's very interesting to see what the full circle of all this can be and how it applies today. So to get you excited about that, we're going to check it out right now and listen and watch Ocean's Vision. And afterward, we're going to have a conversation where Aaron and I are going to unpack the hidden treasures in this story. Ocean's Vision. What lies have been told as the story unfolds, but welcome me and you shall find your heart. Today was a great day, unlike any other. Today was the dawning of a new sunrise. Fresh air sparkled in the sunlight, and he breathed it in. The great father was calling his son, and he stepped forward into the deep waters. For it was the great ocean before him, deep and wide, far and high. He knew that if he dove in, it would overtake him, but he questioned the path. The waves kept crashing and smashing against the seashore. Over and over the waves crashed. But farther out into the deep, he knew there was a greater story. You see, it was storytelling that beats within his heart. He knew that there was a great story written on the scroll of his heart that called to him. He was from the mountains high in the Cascades. He loved the waterfalls, the brooks, and the mountain valleys. This was his home, and his heart was there for a time. But soon the ocean called him. In his sleep, in the thoughtless nights, a single word kept coming to his mind. It tried to penetrate his heart, but he would not allow it. The word was pain. He saw things with his eyes that caused grief and anger, but there were some things too hard, too painful, and too grievous that he shut out and would not let in. And it was this word that haunted him night after night. He got up in the middle of the night to look up at the moon. It shone bright on the quiet darkness of the city. He felt lonely and thought about all the men who went to the moon. He thought it was a great adventure and a great feat, but how lonely it must be on the moon. Would all of this adventure, would all of this energy be worth it, he thought? But can I find a home? Would there be a place that would welcome me and I could call my own? Night after night, the cycle of the moon passed the dark skies. And again, the word of pain echoed in his mind. Things he tried to shut out kept knocking, and no one would know because no one would hear. Can someone just listen? Can someone just hear me? He asked. The vision of the ocean beckoned him again. He got up early and went to the shores. Off in the distance was a ship, great and glorious, full of wind in its sails. He thought how beautiful the sunrise on such a ship must be. What would it be like to be out there? He kept asking because the life he sees there is grand. It was without the pain that knocks at his heart. Over there, he thought, they would welcome me and I would find a home. But he stared at the crashing waves. Over and over it taunted him. He left the beach and returned to his room. Books were all over the floor, reading and seeking, seeking and reading. What wisdom may answer my questions, he asked. There was another word that came to him. It was like a little bird, a little yellow bird that landed on the windowsill. It was beautiful. A song came out of its mouth, and it sang. My life shall overtake you, for I am pursuing you, and I sing over you night after night while you sleep. Sing, sing, sing. The bird cried out. The promise cried out. This little bird sung out its heart, and he listened. The tune warmed his heart, and hope came to him. He opened the door to his place and strode out. People soon came to him and joined him down the street. It was a parade, and it was for him. Celebrations broke out, and the people cheered, and the little bird, the little promise, swept around him and sang out, My life shall overtake you, for I am pursuing you, and I sing over you day after day while you walk. Sing, 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 the little bird, the promise cried out. Life rose within him, and the celebrations overwhelmed him. New people came to him and spoke of the future and of the things he'd never heard of before. Life looked different, and life took him once again to the great ocean. But this time, the people were there and drew a line in the sand. No, it wasn't a dare to cross this border, but an aisle, a red carpet, a path out to the great ocean. They stood on both sides and led the way to the waters. They cheered him on and shouted and said, Hooray! The ocean welcomes its son. He stood at the edge of the waters. The waves kept crashing over and over. The sun shone, and again the ship off in the distance sailed with wind in its sails. It rocked and then eased upon the waters. Life drew him into the water. No longer would there be lies that deceive him. No longer would there be pain, because now he has dived into the deep. Waters rushed around him, and people jumped in with him, swimming around him. He surfaced, and the waters became still. He swam out and looked around. The people just smiled and watched over him as the great ship sailed by. A rope came down, and he climbed as the captain pulled him up and out of the deep. Yes, my son, how great you are to see me face to face. Did you hear me singing? But what about the moon? What about the pain that knocks at my heart? Will I find a home? The captain took him to the bridge of the ship, and the captain steered. Let me show you your new home. The ship sailed, and it picked up speed, incredible speed. The ship raced over the waters and flew and took to the air. The ship sailed higher and higher as the sun beat down. It was wonderful, it was glorious, and the sails strained at its great speed. The ship flew beyond the ocean, the deep, and came back to fly high over the land and come to the mountains. Soon they reached the Cascades and the mountain home. The ship floated down and came to a large wooden platform. A staircase stepped out, and the man and his captain walked down. The light was glorious and golden. The grass was as green as could be. Snow covered the mountains, and rocks, gray as they were, stood strong and kept the mountains tall. The captain led him to a wooden house with a few windows in it. This was the house where the pain came to him. Fear and shame overtook his heart. His knees buckled and he dropped in fear. Tears of grief came over him. His heart cried out, "I thought you brought me to my new home." The captain knelt down beside him and wept too. "I knew that this hurt you. I knew that they didn't see you or understand you or know you, and they called themselves family. But I saw you, and I had to take you back here, not to destroy you, but to redeem you. I'm going inside. Will you join me?" The captain stood up and went to the door of the house and opened it. It took all the strength inside of him just to open his eyes. He opened his eyes and saw the captain standing at the door with tears stinging his vision. And yet, with a quick decision, he stood up. With each step forward, it appeared an eternity took place. But with each step, he sped up. Up the wooden steps, he entered the doorway to the house. Inside, the kitchen looked as normal as it ever did. The home and the hearth smelled just the same. But sitting at the table was the father he didn't fully know. No, it wasn't the captain, but his father from his world. "I am sorry, my son. I didn't see you at your youth. I knew that there were desires within you that I found strange. But I have come back to you, and I have seen you in your future, and I am glad. You have made me proud, though I didn't say it at the time. I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry, so very sorry. You are a great man, and you have great strength." The father stood up and took his hand and kissed it. "I honor you with everything in me. Will you find it in your heart to forgive, as I now see you as you are?" Tears again welled up within his eyes, and a breaking happened. His heart broke, and a great release came from within him. He released the ocean at last, and life overtook him. He never knew this before. He never knew that healing would be so great. The father and the home in front of him dissolved, and he stood back on the ship with the captain, who stepped forward. He asked, "Can that be real? Can that be true?" The captain turned the steering wheel. "More than you can ever know." They sailed farther, and a quiet breeze flowed in his hair. While it was intense, the ocean was peaceful. "Where are we going?" he asked. The captain stepped forward and gave him his spyglass. "Take a look. In it, you see my secrets." He took the spyglass and looked out at the horizon. Inside the vision of the spyglass, he saw himself standing with honor and praise before his peers, holding many awards. His car was paid for. His home was paid for. His life was whole again. And standing with him were his friends, who honored him with great strength and praise. He put the spyglass down. "You can't be joking. That is too good. How can you do this for me?" "But," the captain said, "are you not my child, my son? I see good things about you, great things. You are not ordinary. I wrote you on my heart, and I welcome you there. All you need to do is ask of me and believe that I am good, and that I can make your heart good. Nothing could be simpler." He put the spyglass up again and looked out. He saw nations coming to him, wanting his stories. A new pen came to his hand, and ink oozed out onto the scrolls as he madly wrote away. He was another writer of the stories of the nations. People continued to come to him and seek him for his love and wisdom. He put the spyglass down. "How can this be? Why do they seek me?" "Well," laughed the captain, "when you see I have written your story and rewritten the past, fixing it up, you see you have my heart within you, And out of that abundance, you help others know their story. Welcome me, and you welcome the nations into my heart. Today is a new day for you, my son. Welcome me, and I welcome you. He thought this was too great. He thought secrets were evil and meant to stay hidden, but now he found his heart and discovered that the captain can make it good. He stood up at the bow and looked out as the ship sailed forward. Would he be king of the world? Not exactly as he imagined, but he is a king and a great one at that. He turned back and cried out to the captain, "Take me wherever you like. Steer and lead the way. Bring me to my future. I've seen myself there. Wholeness and life is where I'm headed. Thank you for sending me the promise, that beautiful little bird. Sing, sing, sing. Life has overtaken me. It sings night after night, day after day, and welcomes me home." The great ship sailed on the ocean deep. The sun set and the moon came out. He looked up and saw he wasn't lonely anymore, and his heart was new and fresh. The air was delightful and flowed in his hair. He looked out and saw that the moon and the night were no longer his prison, but his sanctuary. For this day he saw that his life was good at last. Inceptio. And there we are, Ocean's Vision. Aaron, this is your legend. I was so blown away when I got this story long ago, because the images and the feelings it evokes when I got it was just beautiful. I could see it in my imagination as I was getting it. And so when we have a conversation about someone's personal legend, I think it's interesting to see, what is the story talking about you? I mean, how can we look at it? Can we look at it from dream interpretation language or something else? Like, how does this story speak to you?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question, because as life changes, right? As you experience life, the meaning changes also, right?
Sure.
So, what it would mean to me right now is maybe very different from when you wrote it, which is what I think is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, if we're just looking at it from like metaphorical components, there's very interesting symbolism within it. You've got a man or a young man who's in a house, who's somehow unable to get out, who feels maybe afraid or trapped,
right?
Not able to sort of really extend himself out into the world, and really needs some sort of almost external force to come and remind him that there are good things outside the door.
Right.
Don't spend all your time staring at the moon. Let's go outside and see what else there is. There's no point in suffering, right? I think there's like really beautiful imagery in the story, and a really beautiful metaphorical idea of someone who feels a desire to go out into the world and yet doesn't feel confident,
right?
And feels there's lacking something,
and he has pain too. There's he's seeking the wisdom to heal his pain.
Absolutely. And then the question becomes like, well, where does that come from, right?
Right.
Where is that pain manifesting from? And and even in the story, he talks about, I'm looking at the moon, and it seems really cool to go there, but then all I can think about is how lonely it would be to be in the moon, and that's kind of a very odd concept, but yet you can kind of understand that too. And I think that there are parallels that can be drawn immediately between my own life, within it, and then there are ones that are just mythic and of their nature as well. Like certainly from a career perspective, as a cinematographer, you travel a lot, right? And you get all these cool things that you do, and you get to go on these really fun adventures. But at the same time, it can be very lonely, right? So going out into the world can be, going to the moon as an astronaut can be very exciting, but it can also be terrifying,
right?
And it's something like that. Of course, you want to feel the support to go out into the world. So I don't know, what I think is interesting about your story is you have a character who is sort of has is afraid to really extend themselves out, and yet has this sort of pining for the ocean. It's like I'm going to the ocean, and I'm seeing the ocean, and I want to go there, and I want to be there, and yet I'm not going to get in the water, even though it seems like it's what's going to fulfill me, or it's
Right.
going to sort of
There's a
like maybe
reluctancy.
yeah, maybe hide the emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's almost like I'm looking to the ocean to sort of like soothe the pain that is
Mm-hmm.
inside me,
Right.
but that's not really removing the pain, right? You're just looking for a way to sort of like numb it, perhaps, or like find another adventure so you can forget about the root cause of where that suffering comes from.
Sure.
Um,
The ocean could represent several things. It could represent the subconscious or the unconsciousness, or a spiritual realm, or even another area of adventure. Like in the hero's journey, uh, there's the call to adventure, and then there right after that is the reluctant hero. And this character in you in this story, in this legend, has this drawing from the ocean, but there's that, can I do it? Can I jump in and go for it? Can you talk about, if you're okay with that, about how diving into the ocean, what does that mean for you? Have you done that, and what does that look like?
well, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, like, if we're talking literally diving into the ocean, and yes, yes, of course, right? But there is, there's a sense of excitement that creates, and a sense of almost shock, right? Like at the power of what's there, right? Like if you
Mm-hmm.
were to actually dive into the ocean, you'd be like, wow, like this is very strong. Like it looks majestic and gentle, but it's actually very forceful. It's like everything all at once, right? It's full of
Right.
opportunity, but you could drown you. You might die in it, right? Um, all of those things sort of exist, right? So in a way, it's sort of almost like an unlimited potential or
Mm-hmm.
unlimited possibilities,
Right.
right? And even in your story, your the main character isn't willing to go into the ocean until he has like all this community support. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, like go for it, you can go do it,
Right.
and the boat doesn't really show up to drop the rope until he gets into the water, right?
Right.
Which is a which is a really great just life lesson, which is like, the boat's not going to take you out of the water until you get into the water. So you
Right.
can't, you can't move forward, right? You have to there has to be some leap of faith.
What do you think
Um,
about the bird? Because you're absolutely right. In order to dive in to something that's scary or overwhelming, you have to. It's really important to have support. But that bird was a catalyst, wasn't it? Like, what do you think about the bird, and how will it connect with support?
sure. Well, I mean, I do see the bird as sort of like this, like innate kind of calling or call to adventure. It's sort of like this irresistible pull in the story, right? That the character has.
Hmm.
Um, and I think in our own lives, we all have these moments in our lives where something is tugging at us, or something is telling us that like this is what we should be doing, or a little voice inside that says, just go outside today, or maybe go left instead of right. Um, and I've actually had, I can think of very specific examples where that applies to myself,
Okay.
in my own personal life as well,
Yes.
so um, I've had very, getting away from strictly just metaphorical, but just literal. I've had those, um, the equivalent of a bird calling to me also.
Okay.
You
Wow. And go ahead.
oh no, yeah. What were you gonna say?
So when you have a bird calling to you, it helped you get out of that stuck place. Is that right? Is that what that means for you?
Well, yeah. I mean, if we're looking at the story, right,
Mm-hmm.
that you've written, right, it really is. It's about this character who is stuck, right, and experiencing pain,
Right.
and has an inability to kind of go outside, or isn't drawn out until something comes inside to sort of pull them out, right?
Right.
And I think we all have these moments in our lives where things are hard, or maybe we're very depressed, or maybe
Right.
things are very challenging, and it seems almost impossible to like to open the door, right? Like the
Right.
hardest part is actually just stepping outside, let
Right.
alone having the courage to like go to the ocean, get in the ocean, and then maybe get on a boat with some weird guy with Captain Hook. You know, like who's that guy? I don't know. I don't know him. Maybe he's cool. Maybe he's not. Like we don't know who that guy is. Um, so I mean, in my own, uh, bring this kind of full circle.
Uh-huh.
Like the story is really dealing with lots of concepts of separation,
Mm.
uh, family members. Within
Mm-hmm.
your story, there's lots of concepts of separations of fathers and sons, and like
Mm-hmm.
the wounds that may exist through either misunderstanding or not having the time to spend with one another.
Right.
Or who knows, maybe genuine fights. We don't really know in this story, but for sure, the main protagonist is feeling some pain from a lack of family and a lack of connection to his
Right.
father and with healthy.
Right.
And those are all things that I've experienced myself in my own personal life.
Yes, and I have as well. I mean, we can go on to archetypes right now. We've got the bird, which represents a calling of adventure. The main hero, you, or the protagonist, the main character, and then there's the captain of the ship, and then there's the biological father, or the father of the young man's world, and these all different. What archetypes are characters of function. They have a
Mhm.
certain place in a story, and they work a certain way. There can be a lover, a warrior, a king, a sage, a princess, a shadow, a shapeshifter. These are all different functions of a character. And what's interesting is that since the story is dealing with separation and dealing with fatherhood, there's a surrogate father on the captain of the ship who almost represents the spiritual father in my eyes, or someone as a mentor, and
Mhm.
then there's the father in the home that brings him back to. And it's interesting is that I want to talk about this is where he had to go back to that place of pain. He had to be able to address some of the issues or the pain with his father, and there was a reconciliation of some kind. There was some sort of healing. And I think that's very powerful. And honestly, not everybody gets that healing in life, but the character did. And it unlocked everything in the ocean for him, didn't it? It helped him see the future. And it was almost like the pain with the father relationship was like a chain holding him back. But then there was that release. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Would you be willing? What would you think about that idea of being able to address it, and then that helps you unlock your potential? What do you think about that?
Well, absolutely, because I think that, if you're holding back pain, right? Like if that's a lot of energy that's required to sort of hold on to that emotion, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you may become numb to how much energy is involved in that. Um, but once you have like maybe a catharsis or sort of like a letting go of that pain, suddenly the world is open, right? Because you're not afraid of the world as much anymore. Like you're able to breathe, and you're able to sort of like see or look around you. And so you're no longer just like staring at yourself, and you no longer look at the moon and think, God, it must be so lonely at the moon. You look at the moon and be like, wow, the moon is so beautiful, right?
Right.
You're like, wow, like
Wonderful.
I would
I
love to
love
go
that.
outside today, because you have those, the reflection, the water reflection, the ocean reflection is no longer on pain, right? The reflection is like, oh, how wonderful the world is, because you're no longer coming, you no longer feel that you're coming back to yourself. You're more able to,
Right.
I think, go freely into the world. Um, and that also enables you to be open with other people, so
Sure.
within the story that you've written, the captain's like showing him with a spyglass and all
Right.
these possibilities and all these
Yes.
things, and and the guy is like, well, I don't understand how this could be. Could this really be?
Right. It's too
And
good
the
to
answer
be
is
true,
yes.
right?
Yeah, the answer is it absolutely can be true, and all those things are true, but you just have to believe them, right? And you have to
Right.
be open to them, and you can't be, inside your house with the shutters closed,
Right.
sad about them. But to be able to put yourself forward, um, to believe in that, you have to, that takes risk, and to
Courage.
put
It
yourself,
takes courage too.
yeah,
Absolutely
right.
does.
And that's scary, right? And without the support of other people, right?
Yeah.
Like without,
Right.
we've got the bird that helps him, we've got the captain that helps him,
Right.
we've got a whole crowd that like follows this guy to the ocean. It's like, hey man, get in the water, it's fine.
Right.
Like it's gonna be okay. But in all these levels of your story, the character is getting support. Like, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. Like, the captain brings him to his father in the mountain, and he's like, all right, like, um, this is your home. This is
Mm.
your biological father. You need this more than you know.
Mm.
And
Right.
they're all the support is around you. Now you just have to take the first step.
Yes.
And in the story, he goes into his father's house, and he sees his father there, and and who knows what pain that character has from the story, right? But
Right.
what we do know is that it's there,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that we know that it relates to his father, and we know that it relates to separation and some suffering between them. And to have somebody that you probably most want the love from, right?
Yeah,
Um,
definitely, or approval, or the support from the father himself. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Approval, support,
Mm-hmm.
love, like, to sort of give you sort of unconditional love and say, like, I
Yeah.
see you, right?
Right.
That's the most empowering thing you can give to a child,
Right, and
right?
that's a good thing, because remember, this podcast, this show, is not just for adults. This is for young boys and young girls as well. And I think that you just touched on is very important, is that if you're listening or watching this show and you're a 12-year-old boy or 11-year-old, 12-year-old girl, whatever, and you're in your formative years where your life's calling is showing up, there's things inside you that are opening up, there's desires for your destiny or your purpose, or you're getting a sense of what your gifting is, and you don't have a supportive father or a mother, and you don't have that support system, let this legend speak to you as well, and to give you that encouragement, to give you that strength, that even if you're a young person who's facing the beginnings of your adventure, this story can encourage you, because there will be men and women, fathers and mothers in your life that will come and help raise you up and help you become the hero that you are for your story. And I think that what Aaron and I are talking about is not just for the healing of adults. Like, Aaron and I are older now, and both of us have our own relationships with our own real father and also our mentors. And we've had to go through a lot of pain and adventure and healing as well. But for the young, for the youth, we need to encourage you guys. We need to support you, and give you the confidence that you can do this, that you are powerful, you are strong, you are beautiful, that you have the ability to pursue your dreams. And I think that what this story also speaks about at the end was talking about it being a king. He's the king of the world, not as what he thinks it is, but he's a great king at that. And I think it's very important that the story not only talks about the pain, but also about identity. Who are you? Who am I? Are we orphans? I mean, some of the greatest stories have orphans. Superman was an orphan. Harry Potter was an orphan. Annie, the orphan Annie, was an orphan. There's all sorts of different major superheroes or characters. They're all orphans, but they all had something to overcome. And I think for all of us, we have to overcome our own wounds and our own orphanness and become the royalty that we are, become the king or the queen, the princess, the prince, whatever, that we can see ourselves as that. But I think for what Aaron, what you're talking about, right, is seeing that through that spyglass. So I have a question for you. What are the things in your life that maybe parallel with this story, or even from your own personal life, that help you, that empower you? What is the thing that makes you live like a king in your identity from a place of wholeness? What are those things that help you?
Um, well, that's a really good question. Like within this story, especially with this reading, um, what's interesting is I could actually like close my eyes
Mm,
and see myself in each position that this character was in my own personal story, right? So I could
Yes.
find things relatable to myself that almost put me identically where this character was, which is fascinating because you wrote this character, this whole story 10 years ago.
I
So,
know, right?
like how does that? So much has happened in 10 years, right?
Right.
Since when you wrote this story. So yeah, that's kind of insane, right? But it just goes to show that we find meaning within these things in a mythic way.
Right.
I would say that you know when you survive something that's really difficult and you overcome it and you're able to release that negative energy, like when you're able to kind of conquer it, there is a certain confidence that can no longer be taken away from you that is amazing.
Right.
And so in the story, when, the son, goes to his father and is like, like the father's like, I see you, I believe in you. Like, like, I'm sorry for anything I've done, but like, like you're amazing, right? You can tell like that's a turning point because all the insecurities that this child might have about like, am I good enough, or like, am I doing the right thing, or
Do I have what it
maybe,
takes?
yeah, do I have what it takes? But why didn't my dad spend time with me? Is that because I'm not a good kid, or maybe I'm not a good person? It totally changes, and by the end of it, what you're seeing is a mastery of an openness of the world, right? We're seeing a character who now he's a king in a sense of like a king is a ruler, like a king is somebody
Yes.
who is confident and is able to like survey the land, right, and understand what is happening, and also create abundance and create strength, create joy, and all these things. And so what I love about it is at the end, you have a character who is incredibly confident, who is now has all this knowledge of their own transformation, their own
Right.
suffering, and their own healing, and is then able to share that with other people. Right now,
Right.
he's essentially becoming a captain. He's becoming a captain of a ship for somebody else.
That's a
And you
great
never know.
point. Yes, absolutely.
So in a way, he's like now able, and even the captain says, he's like, look, I will take you to all these places and you will learn all these things. And character's like, yes, like I want this now. I can see myself doing this.
Yes.
And now the child who in the beginning of the story is without hope or insecure or so needing of other people's help or needing of that bird to pull them out,
Right.
as yeah, they're able to be the person who is like, I got you. Like, come into the water. It's fine.
Yeah, I
I
love
got
it. I love
nothing
it.
to worry about. I got an awesome ship. I've been all over the world. Like, even this year I've been all over the world. Like, I've been in Singapore and now I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah. So I've been all over the world this year. So it's the parallels for my own life in particular as a cinematographer are incredibly clear and specific.
Wow.
So I definitely see those things. And then, if we were to, like break down, like what do these archetypes like mean to myself, right? To my own story,
Right.
right? I can find very specific moments for each of these things. For instance, in the beginning of the story, he's sort of inside his house and he doesn't want to leave, or he looks up at the moon and he goes to the ocean, but he always returns home. He doesn't do anything.
Right.
I had suffered a very sad separation from my son, and also from my wife at the time. And they were no longer in the country. Like they were in another country. I didn't have the opportunity to spend time with my son, and I didn't really know at that point in time what was going to be the relation with my wife at that time. We're no longer together now, but it was a very hard time, and that was right after Christmas. So it was a very a very dark time for me, and that was it was the one thing I always feared, which was like kind of the loss of my family, which is something that I really wanted, right? And I think we all can relate to that. And I didn't want to go outside. I was stuck in my house. I was depressed. The curtains were drawn. The Christmas tree was still up. It was like we're at the end of January. Nobody's taking down the Christmas tree. And I remember this one day I was just lying down on my couch. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to go outside. I just wanted to do nothing. And it was late afternoon, and then suddenly this light like came down through this blind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And were closed. The blinds were closed,
Mm-hmm.
but it just the perfect angle to make it through the blinds.
Mm-hmm.
My Christmas tree,
Mm-hmm.
and the thing that was hanging on my Christmas tree were these ornaments, my grandmother's kind of like these blue and purple glass ornaments.
Okay.
Uh, they were hers, right?
Right.
And so the sun came through at this perfect angle and hit these ornaments, and the light came back and just blinded me. It just in my eye, like it was so bright, like I couldn't like ignore it. Like I was just
Wow.
turning on the couch. I was like, make it go away. But it was so beautiful that I was
Huh.
drawn to it, and I was
Wow.
also. It felt like that bird, right? It felt like
Ah,
that
right.
song, that
Right.
was that came to me and basically was like, "Hey,
My
pay
life will
attention to me."
overtake you, for I am pursuing you.
Yeah,
Wow. Wow.
I didn't like. I wasn't pursuing that. Like that. The lines were closed. The sun, everything pursued me, right? And it had a lot of meaning because that was also family, right? That was my
Yep.
grandmother's
Right. Of
Christmas
course.
ornament. And what ended up happening was I took up my camera. He was nearby, and I started taking pictures.
Mm.
And I started taking pictures of these
Mm-hmm.
ornaments, and I took
Mm-hmm.
these amazing pictures of like these ornaments with like cellophane, like plastic wrap. You would
Mm.
never think it's anything special, but I took the most insane, gorgeous. They like look like moonscapes. They could be the moon. For all
Wow.
intents and purposes, right?
The
It's so
moon.
abstract and so alien. Yeah. And they're gorgeous. They're actually some of my favorite photos. And what began was this exiting of the house. I would take my camera and I would go
Ah.
outside and I started doing a lot of street photography,
Wow.
and that became you know street photography and those type of things became a way that I started to gain not only my confidence again, but sort of started refilling my creativity,
Mm-hmm.
and it became almost like a samurai way of
Mm.
like becoming a better cinematographer, but also
Mm-hmm.
understanding the world and also finding some emotional depth that I could relate
Right.
to. Um, so I was pulled out of my own house through,
Wow.
while I was separated from, my son and from my family. So,
Mm. Right.
um, so I can absolutely relate to the bird component, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I had it happen to me, right?
Right.
Uh, and again, in your story, we have the character. He leaves the house, and the crowd is
Right.
cheering for him. There are all these other people there, and I had you know similar things happen. You have people in your life who show up. And
Mm.
I think that's a good thing for kids who are watching this. Who should understand that too. Is that like I think sometimes you might feel that like you're alone. And that
Mm-hmm.
maybe
Right.
nobody will show up. But I think that more often people do. And I think that
Right.
more
That's good.
often, yeah, right? I think they really do. And I think there's this tendency to feel you're alone. But like
Mm-hmm.
when you actually share your feelings, or when you express the pain that's sort of inside of you and
Right.
how you're feeling, um, people are able to connect to that. And not only do they connect to that, they will help you. And they will help you in ways
Right.
that you would never know, right? You could never expect more than you could ever, like the generosity will
Right.
exceed your wildest expectations.
And they're
uh,
worth more than their weight in gold. The timeliness of these people who give you favor or advice or kind of point you in a certain direction and give you a nudge of some kind, or just the thing like, yeah, you can do this. I believe in you. Oh, so good, Aaron.
absolutely. I mean, even going to talking about the ocean, right? And this
Mm-hmm.
character who ends up at the ocean. I have a very good friend of mine from film school. We go back now, I think, at least 18 years, right? So we're good buddies. We made a lot of movies together. And he's, one of those people that's always been there.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a house, in Santa Monica near the beach that he wasn't using. And he was like, you got to get out of that house. You can't be in that house anymore.
There
You
it
need to
is.
go to the beach. You need to go to the ocean. It's restorative. Go to the ocean. So,
Wow.
for 6 months, he let me like rent, his place 5 blocks from the beach. And what did I do? I went to the beach, and I would go to the beach and I would walk the beach with my camera, and it was restorative, and it was great to
That's
like,
beautiful. That's
you
beautiful.
know, that was a very filling thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also on that same note, again with your story, the ocean didn't stop my pain, but it did soothe my pain.
Sure. That makes sense.
So, right,
Yeah.
like again, I know that metaphorically in the story, it seems the ocean could be like a subconscious way
Right.
of looking at lots of possibilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think most people may say that to them would think the ocean can be a very calming or soothing thing as well.
It
So I
can
don't
be a
know,
refuge.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Um, and then if you even get into the captain in the ship, right? Like, um, I've had many mentors, in my life. I've been very lucky. I didn't grow up with my father,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and my father was well, I should say was uh, incredibly talented. So he was a photographer, a blues musician, blues
Mm-hmm.
photographer, a journalist.
Hmm.
Just really a Renaissance man, really funny guy, just incredible intellectual. But I didn't grow up with him, and I
Mm-hmm.
got to see him as I grew up. But there were so many things that I didn't really know or get to learn,
Right.
uh, and a lot of things that you would want to learn, right?
Right.
Um, so there was always, even though we were felt connected, there was always a distance
Mm.
there because we didn't get that time in.
Mm.
Uh, but I was also somebody who was always lucky to have other parents. I had
Mm-hmm.
2 other stepdads in my
Mm-hmm.
life.
Okay.
Um, one that's no longer here either, but one of which who still is, who's also a musician and who's even been a pirate for Halloween. So there you go. So I mean, I could easily put my
Wow.
stepdad as the captain of the other ship.
Okay.
Um, and so you can see that role of the surrogate father, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and it doesn't have to be somebody's stepdad, right? I also have
Right.
many mentors that I have met that have also played that role.
Right.
Like Mark. I have a professor in undergrad, Mark Chilcote. He was a fantastic mentor and father figure to me
Mm.
with filmmaking, and I didn't really agree with him about everything, but like he was that role, and he was that confidence, right? He kind of lifted you up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and both of my stepdads, I got different things from. They each
Mm-hmm.
brought their different part of the world with
Mm-hmm.
them. Um, and with that too, um, I've had, because I'm a cinematographer now. There's a lot of training, there's a lot of schooling.
Right.
And I've
Film
had a
school.
chance to meet some just wonderful people, wonderful cinematographers who are incredibly knowledgeable, who are also those kind of father figures who have
Right.
like sort of been incredibly encouraging. So that idea of the captain who can take you further into the world, right, and help give you confidence and show you the possibilities. I mean, it's absolutely true, and it's
Mm.
absolutely happened to
Mm-hmm.
me. Um,
That's great. And here's
yeah.
another thought. I mean, thank you for sharing all that. I mean, thank you for your vulnerability and your transparency, because everything that you talked about has its degree of the suffering of the hero. And I identify with that suffering in my own way too. And not only do we need surrogate fathers or mentors, but sometimes we have to have ourselves, where we have to be a father to the little young man, or even a little girl if you're a woman, being a parent to your younger self, your internal self, and being able to encourage yourself and say, you can do it, or I believe in you, and really speak to yourself, to all the different ages that you are on the inside, all the different times of the soul, if you want to call it that. And so I think that is also a tool we can use, and the audience can take away, is to be able to be a parent to yourself, if in the case that you don't have it right now in that season of your life. So I want to wrap things up, Aaron. First of all, thank you for sharing everything that you talked about and all your ideas and all your interpretations. I've loved this story for many years. It's one of my more favorite ones. And knowing you all these years and being close friends, it's just such a treasure to have you on the show. So thank you for being a guest on this show. And just real briefly, do you have any closing thoughts and how you want to tie this up before we go?
Um, I would say that I think the last thing that we didn't touch on too much was, there's the whole story at its core, is about this kind of thing about fathers and sons, right?
Right.
Like there's a son who's missing his father, and it's, it comes full circle. And I think that, having a son of my own now, right, makes me know or understand more the things that I didn't get from my dad and the things that I wanted, right? And having time with my dad made me realize how valuable those things are and how valuable it is to have the love of one's father and how much that does mean to you, which I think makes me a better father to my son, right?
Oh, that's good.
So I think understanding what that separation feels like that I had with my dad, even separated from my son by about 6,000 miles,
right?
It creates an understanding and a questioning of like, how can I do better? What can I do more so that my son can go forward in the world and feel confident and know like, hey, I got you. I love you.
Yeah.
Believe in you. You can do this. I'm 100% behind you. So
that's good, Aaron.
I just want to say that for any kids that are watching that maybe don't feel, that way, maybe they're worried maybe their parents don't feel that way or otherwise. Sometimes your parents love you way more than they actually say or know. And sometimes they think that they're, expressing it, and they express it in their own way that you sometimes learn later on. But even if your parents, are not that for you, there will absolutely be people in your life who will bring that gift of mentorship and leadership and help you go on your journey. So,
that's good,
don't
Aaron.
just do it. Just get in the boat. Don't stay at home. Look at the moon.
That's good.
Get on the ship, with a good mentor, with a good captain. Don't get on the ship
get with a good captain, not a bad pirate or something. Well, Aaron, thank you. That's a great way of wrapping it up. And to our audience, thank you for joining us today on Legends of the Wind. It's our pleasure to share with you these legends, these stories for actual children and adults. And just want to be encouraging you and inspiring you and to let you know that you have a dream and you have permission to pursue it and to do it. So thank you so much for joining us today on Legends of the Wind and for listening and watching to Ocean's Vision and our friend Aaron Torres. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again till the next time. Thanks for joining us today on the Legends of the Wind podcast. Be sure to subscribe, like, and hit the bell button to be alerted of future episodes. And don't forget, our stories are found here in life and beyond the imagination. Now you can finish your story. Keep dreaming, keep believing, and we'll see you again in our next episode of Legends of the Wind.